On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Spokane area, welcome to our 2021 General Election Candidate Forum featuring candidates for Spokane Municipal Court Judge number 3. I am Sylvia Oliver, your moderator, and Mike Bell of the League will be the timer. Election day for the 2021 general election is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Ballots will be mailed to all registered voters about 3 weeks before Election Day and must be postmarked or deposited in conveniently located ballot boxes no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. You can register to vote by mail or online by October 25th, 2021, or in person on Election Day at the Spokane County Elections Office, 1033 West Gardner Avenue, or at Center Place, 2426 Discovery Place, Spokane Valley. For other questions about casting your ballot or information about the candidates, contact Spokane County Elections Office, 509-477-2320, or visit their website, spokanecounty.org/elections, or on the League of Women Voters online voters guide, vote411.org. I will be asking candidates questions that have been formulated by the League's Voter Services Committee, and will ask as many questions as time allows. Before the questions begin, candidates will have up to 30 seconds to introduce themselves and tell the voters why they are running. They will have up to 1 minute to answer each question with additional time for rebuttal or a follow-up question as appropriate. Each candidate will then have the opportunity for a 30-second closing statement. The first speaker will alternate with each question, and the moderator will repeat the question for the second candidate. Now we will introduce the candidates as they will appear on the ballot and in order by surname. They are Mr. Matthew Antush and Ms. Gloria Ochoa-Bruck. Starting with you, Mr. Antush, you'll have 30 seconds to tell us why you're running for Spokane Municipal Court Judge number 3.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Antush. Right now, I'm the judge in the same courtroom where 30 years ago in 1991 as a law student, I volunteered as a public defender, helping clients charged with misdemeanor crimes. I never thought much about future ambition. I considered it an opportunity for me to gain experience, to practice the sense of compassion that my parents gave me, and to give something back for the privileges that I'd received. Since 2018, I've worked every day, as I promised I would in my swearing in, with that same mindset. Look forward to continuing the work.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, why are you running for Spokane Municipal Court Judge number 3?
I have been preparing myself to seek judicial office for the last 15 years of my career. I started out my career as a deputy prosecuting attorney in Benton County, working with victims of crime. I then transitioned into private practice and public defense, where I practiced in 13 different jurisdictions across Eastern Washington in state and federal court. I am currently serving as the Kalispell Tribal Court Judge, and I have previous experience working as a Spokane Chief Judge. And I believe that my experience would bring a broad new perspective to the court.
Thank you very much. The first question we'll start with you, Ms. Ochoa-Bruck. Explain what motivated you to run for this office and what skills and experience you would bring to this job.
Is the timer started? I'm sorry, I was waiting for the timer to start. There we go. The experience that I would bring, I touched upon in my introduction, but I would be the only judicial officer on that court that has had the type of experience that I have. Not only my legal experience, but I've also done policy work for 6 years. I served as the point of contact for the city of Spokane, doing criminal justice reform initiatives with the city and the county. I also have a long proven track record of community service, both in the legal community and also in the Spokane community. One of the things that I bring is a deep knowledge of the issues that are impacting the Spokane community here locally. I belong to a number of organizations. If you go to my website, you'll be able to see all of the involvement that I have had in the past 10 years that I've lived here since 2009 in Spokane. But prior to that, I have a long history of public and community service. And so what I would bring would be a wealth of new perspective. Also, having practiced in 14 different jurisdictions, I have seen bright spots in other jurisdictions that I would be able to implement in municipal court.
Thank you. Mr. Antush, explain what motivated you to run for this office and what skills and experiences you would bring to this job.
Yeah, prior to coming to the court in 2018, I worked for 25 years as a public defender in the criminal courts of Spokane. I figure I represented somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 clients. I worked in the traditional court, of course. I worked in community court, juvenile court, drug court, felony mental health court, and I represented people on the residential DOSA or drug offender sentencing alternative. I've had an opportunity to interact, frankly, intimately with people who are charged and appear before the court. I've practiced in front of many of those judges that are in this county. They're all very familiar with me. I have considerably more experience than most any other of the judges when they came to the court in the very court where I'm working. And so that's why I seek this position.
Thank you. The second question will start with Mr. Antush. Since we cannot ask you to talk about specific rulings, would you please explain your judicial philosophy and how that would influence your work on the municipal court?
Right. Well, you know, the court doesn't get an opportunity to make many policy decisions as far as what is, what becomes a crime, or what the police decide to enforce, or what the prosecutors decide to file. It is a judge's role to determine the law and how it applies to the facts in each case that are presented to it. So I tend to be very careful with the cases that come before me. Since I have so much experience working in this type of law, doing 25 years as a public defender in municipal court, or excuse me, 23 years as a public defender in municipal court. I'm very familiar with the law, apply the facts as I see them, and I guess I would be very careful, would be the best way I could describe it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, since we cannot ask you about specific rulings, would you please explain your judicial philosophy and how that would influence your work on the municipal court?
So a lot of the work that I've done, back in 2016, I was doing criminal justice reform initiatives, and I realized that I had a knowledge gap. And so I returned back to WSU and I earned my master's in criminal justice and criminology, so that the work that I did was grounded in evidence-based practices and actual research. My judicial philosophy really has been, I've been very passionate about the school to prison pipeline and eliminating young people entering to the criminal justice system, as well as rehabilitating and integrating people back into the community. So my word that I would use would be, I would be very thoughtful, careful also, but very thoughtful in ensuring that it's important that people have the resources and tools they need to successfully reintegrate into the community. But then also, if people are given the resources and tools to reintegrate back into the community, that there's also an accountability aspect to that as well. And so I would bring a balanced approach to my judicial philosophy and working collaboratively with the community and providing more opportunities for people to successfully reintegrate and rehabilitate.
Thank you. The next question will go first to Ms. Ochoa-Bruck. What do you feel is the most important issue facing the municipal court? What ideas do you have to improve court efficiency?
So I think one of the big issues the court does face, having worked at the city of Spokane for 6 years, again, doing policy work, I'm familiar with the case volume, the need for additional funding for the court, for additional resources for public defenders to have investigators, for example, victim services. So there is a need for advocacy for funding the municipal court in Spokane. And there's also a need to build collaborative partnerships with service providers in the community. There is a lack of options for judges to be able to safely and successfully provide more open conditions of release for people while their cases are pending, because we don't have those connections. And that's where I would bring my experience of building collaborative partnerships and my deep involvement in the community and working with organizations as, for example, being on the advisory board of MIA, which provides sexual assault victims and domestic violence victims resources for people with language access issues in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Antush, what do you feel is the most important issue facing the municipal court, and what ideas do you have to improve court efficiency?
So we do a lot of things in municipal court. There's over 100,000 filings per year in the municipal court, but about 90% of them are infractions. The things that we see is recidivism. When I came to the court, you're looking at a huge percentage. I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% recidivism. And so immediately we started working on things like a supported release program, which is what we are instituting. We got the funding for it in 2019. Pandemic slowed it down. That's exactly what we're doing. We're having people evaluated for needs and services pre-trial. It has to be voluntary because constitutionally we can't order it. Post-conviction, we've implemented a risk needs responsivity tool for DUI, domestic violence, and high-risk offenders so that they can get partnered with DSHS. Fortunately, we've had our probation department trained to do just that.
Great, thank you. The next question will first go to Mr. Antush, and it's a rather long one, question. So, the Spokane County Board of Commissioners officially reestablished the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council, SRLJC, on June 29th, reducing the size of the advisory council from 25 to 18 and establishing a racial equity committee, as well as reducing the city of Spokane involvement. Given the changes in the SRLJC, how will you as a member of the court address the impact of the justice system on people of color? And what initiatives do you believe can create a fair, just, and equitable criminal justice system?
Well, thank you. Anytime we talk about race equity in a court context, the things that judges have control over, it is an access to justice issue. In my work as 25 years as a public defender, it taught me anything. It taught me that we need to address the barriers to access to justice and also the underlying contributors to criminal offenses. And these underlying contributors are things like poverty, addiction, homelessness, mental illness, and of course, race equity. And I think often people don't realize limited English proficiency. That's why we created a supported release program that's going to become, it's going to come online probably late October. We've reduced the number of hearings for folks so that they don't have mandatory court dates, risk the issuance of warrants. We've rebuilt our probation department to be more service-oriented, had them partnered with DSHS so we can sign them up for services there. We've even trained them in risk needs responsivity, in cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are other programs that I could talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, the Spokane County Board of Commissioners officially re-established the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council on June 29th, reducing the size of the advisory council from 25 to 18 and establishing a racial equity committee, as well as reducing City of Spokane involvement. Given the changes in the SRLJC, how will you, as a member of the court, address the impact of the justice system on people of color, and what initiatives do you believe can create a fair, just, and equitable criminal justice system?
So I was actually instrumental in my role with the city in reestablishing the Law and Justice Council back in 2013 when I started with the city. Myself and John Dixon with the county, we were the point of contacts to actually establish the SRLJC with that composition. It was very disappointing to see that the county commissioners eliminated key positions, including the involvement of the city, because the city does have, again, like the highest case volume in the system. It's really important to acknowledge that those closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And so it's really important to ensure that we are being inclusive and involving community and doing with community, not to community. And one of the things that I think the court can do while we try to figure out how we can get the SRLJC to have the appropriate representation is for the city to take a leadership role and to create a city equity racial equity committee, but also be inclusive of people with disabilities and other marginalized communities.
Thank you. This next question will first go to Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, sorry. Many jurisdictions in the country have established public funding of judicial campaigns. Would you favor that or not, and why?
I would actually favor that. because I think one of the things that I'm sure Mr. Antush is also experiencing, judicial campaigns aren't very exciting. We're not allowed to take any policy positions. People usually invest in campaigns because they feel that specific official is going to represent their views, their perspective, their policies that they support. Judges can't do that. So it would also open, not only would it open up the doors to be able to run competitive campaigns so that candidates can get out to the voters, it would also expand the access to attorneys that are eligible, experienced, and qualified, and would do a great job on the bench. They don't have the social capital networks to help finance a campaign. And so I would be in favor because of that reason. I think it would just provide the ability to have more competitive judicial campaigns with qualified candidates that would be able to get out to the voters and do all the outreach necessary.
Great, thank you. Mr. Antush, many jurisdictions in the country have established public funding of judicial campaigns. Would you favor that or not, and why?
I think anything that we could do that would bring more qualified candidates to the race to file for judge positions would be beneficial. So yeah, I agree with my opponent very much that I think it'd be beneficial to have more folks coming in, and frankly, I think she said it very well. I don't disagree with anything she said there.
Great, thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Antush. How has the municipal court met the challenges of working during this pandemic? Could some of those accommodations be considered for future procedures?
The pandemic has been extremely difficult. First thing that we did was recognize that we had to limit the number of people in the courtroom. I think we had maybe 3 weeks where the only hearings we had was things like the mandatory hearings for DUI offenses and domestic violence offenses, first appearance type hearings. We then, under the Supreme Court emergency orders, we were able to extend out some of the speedy trial, the cases, because speedy trial had pretty much been suspended, as well as the court rule as far as the time for arraignment. We have 3 hearings per docket. In my courtroom, it's a 8:45, 9:45, 10:45 docket, and we have smaller case numbers. A lot of that can be continued. We do remote hearings, and we are also reluctant to issue warrants. And I think all of that can probably be continued.
Great, thank you. Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, how has the municipal court met the challenges of working during this pandemic? Could some of those accommodations be considered for future procedures?
I'm waiting for the clock. I absolutely believe that it's important to take this opportunity that we had to, we were forced to try alternatives. The system we've always had is that you're scheduled to show up at court at a certain time, and you're going to get called between, whether the dockets are between like 8 to noon, you'll get called sometime between then. So if you're someone with a child that needs childcare, or someone that's a working poor and needs to take unpaid time off to go to court, it is a huge burden for people. And so I think it would be important for us to take a step back once the pandemic is over and really see what solutions can we continue doing moving forward to ensure access to justice, removing barriers for people to continue communicating with their attorneys, continue participating in their cases, but not having to take that valuable time off of work if they can avoid it, and not having childcare issues and transportation issues. So I think definitely we should be looking into what we can preserve moving forward.
Thank you. So this next question, we'll start with Ms. Ochoa-Bruck. We know the Washington state constitution specifies judges are to be elected, yet voters likely know very little about candidates, and candidates often run unopposed. What are your thoughts on considering amending the Constitution to allow an elected body to appoint judges to the court?
Well, with anything, there's pros and cons to both. I belong to the American Bar Association criminal justice section, and have the opportunity to interact with judges from other states that have those systems. And I mean, it would require a lot of thoughtful consideration. Some of the complaints that I hear from states that just have a complete appointment process is that there's nepotism involved and there's politics involved. What I hear as pros and cons on the elected side is that, if somebody runs for office, people don't know, just to your point, they don't know a lot about judicial races and judicial candidates. So perhaps voters aren't going to necessarily always select or elect the most qualified judge because they don't have enough information in which to do so. So I think there's pros and cons to both systems. And I think that if as a state, we decided to go that route, we would have to make sure that we were very thoughtful in how we established the process to make sure that it was as fair and as possible, and ensure that it ended up with us getting the best judges that we can on the bench.
Great, thank you. Mr. Antush, we know that the Spokane State Constitution specifies judges are to be elected, yet voters likely know very little about candidates, and candidates often run unopposed. What are your thoughts on considering amending the Constitution to allow an elected body to appoint judges to the court?
I think it's critically important that, I think it's critically important that the judges are elected and by the public. We serve the public. It's our obligation under the Code of Judicial Conduct and the oath that we take that we get out and we interact with the public. It is unfortunate that so many judges are unopposed. I think sometimes they feel that means they're doing such a great job. And that can lead to something like black robe fever, is what we used to call it when I was a public defender. But I've worked very hard personally since I was appointed in 2018 to avoid that problem. And I get out, I try to get in, before the pandemic it was a little easier, get out into the public, go to public forums and Blueprint for Reform grades and things like that. But I would be opposed to any other changes.
Thank you. So this is the final question. It goes to Mr. Antush. How can a judge contribute to the public's confidence in the judiciary? At the end of your term, how would voters be able to determine that you had done?
Somebody else has a dog. As I've been out, I've heard that, what people want is a judge who's knowledgeable, who is equitable, who listens. And that is really the only way, I think, that we're going to have confidence in the judicial system. When I was meeting with the Bar Association a couple of weeks ago, they asked me a question similar to this. And I told them that when people leave my courtroom, lawyers, defendants, witnesses, as long as they felt as though they were seen and heard, that's really all I can do. And so you have to pay attention to the people who are talking to you, to answer their questions honestly, and ask them honest questions. So,
thank you. Ms. Ochoa-Bruck, how can a judge contribute to the public's confidence in the judiciary? At the end of your term, how would voters be able to determine that you had done a good job?
I'm sorry, my little dog, had to be taken away, so he's been removed. Apologize. I was left alone with him. Mind repeating the question? I apologize.
No, that's no problem at all. How can a judge contribute to the public's confidence in the judiciary? At the end of your term, how would voters be able to determine that you had done a good job?
So I think that it's important for judges to not, part of a judge's job, I'm currently a judge with the Kalispell Tribe, part of my job is to preside over cases. That is the core of my role. But what I think it's really important is for judges to exercise their judicial influence and leadership and lead initiatives to increase access to justice, to improve systems, to advocate for court funding, because we are allowed to do that as judges, to advocate for court funding specifically, to get involved in the community and really understand the populations that they serve. I think at the end of my term, if elected, you would know that I did a good job, because you would see change. You would see that there would be an increased community court's great, and I fully support it, but I think there's more opportunities to expand options for people. Kind of going back to my judicial philosophy, I think it's important that we help people succeed in reintegrating back into the community, because if they're successful, their families will be successful and our community will thrive.
Great, thank you very much. That's the end of our questions, and now we're going to go to closing statements, and you will each have up to 30 seconds, and we'll start with Ms. Ochoa-Bruck.
Do I wait for the timer to start? My name is Gloria Ochoa-Bruck, and I'm running for Spokane Municipal Court Judge Position 3. I'm asking for your vote on November 2nd, because I would bring my long history and proven track record of community and public service. I have a long history as well of not only legal experience, but also judicial experience and policy experience. I would bring a perspective to the court that is not there at this time. So I respectfully ask for your vote on November 2nd to serve as your Spokane Municipal Court Judge for Position 3.
Thank you. Mr. Antush, your 30-second closing statement.
Thank you. My 30-year commitment to procedural justice is real, demonstrable, and it's very well known. I've used it to serve Spokane. I'm endorsed by over 30 judges, both active and retired, local leaders like Mayor Woodward and Council President Beggs, unions including Police Guild and Spokane Labor Council, several business leaders, and over 60 local attorneys. I'm the only candidate willing to be evaluated by these retired judges, over 300 local lawyers and law professors. They all rated me well qualified. I've discussed some of my qualifications here tonight. I've earned your vote, I hope. I look forward to continuing the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes our 2021 general election candidate forum featuring candidates for Spokane Municipal Court Judge. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you to our candidates for participation in the forum. We hope this has given you, the voters, information that will help you make an informed decision when returning your ballots by 8 p.m. Election Day, Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. The League has also scheduled other candidate forums for regional, city council, and school board positions, and links to all forums are on our website and can be found at lwvspokane.org. Again, thank you very much.